So, why Svendsen? Where did Pastor with No Answers go? Well, honestly, I'll tell you why it's the Svendsen, because first of all, that's what I want it to be. Second of all, it more represents what I want to do with this podcast for the long haul. Hey, let's just face it. I want to talk about all sorts of stuff, not just pastor stuff, and I like my last name, and my brother, although not appearing on the show as often as he used to, is just quite as part of this show behind the scenes. So, the name fits, the name is staying, and I also feel at complete liberty to talk about anything Joey Svendsen wants to. And I did that when it was called Pastor with No Answers, but I reckon Pastor with No Answers is a little misleading when you don't talk about pastoral type things. But I'm thankful that we still have our Pastor with No Answers listeners, but I want to welcome you to the Svendsen. And today we have a familiar voice, Jack Hoey, a buddy of mine, the younger Jack Hoey. And, you know, originally intended he was going to come on and talk about a bunch of different theological questions I was going to throw at his way, kind of like a little popcorn Ask Jack deal. But since scheduling that time with him, I actually thought, hey, why not talk about all this healing stuff going on at Seacoast Church, especially since a lot of my listeners have heard of it and have asked about what I thought and those sorts of things. So a couple of things about that is I want to let you know that on a podcast called The Pastor Collective, it's hosted by Darren Patrick and Greg Surratt. On the latest episode of this podcast, Josh Surratt goes on there, and I'm sorry, it's called The Pastors Collective. So on that podcast, episode 3, Josh Surratt, ultimately my boss, goes on and talks about the healing stuff going on at Seacoast from his perspective. And so Jack and I talk about it from our perspective. That's mainly what we discuss on this episode. Hope you guys are doing well, and hope you enjoy it. Well, we're here with good buddy of mine, Jack Hoey. Been on here a good bit. We've even come up with some terminology called Ask Jack. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to say is at the end of this episode, so here's the point of the episode. The point of the episode is not a debate. The point is to highlight Jack's thoughts on these things because that's what I like to do. I like to get other people on here and just did an interview yesterday and pretty much disagreed with everything the person said, but the point of the conversation was to hear what they were saying, and honestly, to be truthful, I agree with most things that Jack has to say, but that's what I want to highlight is what Jack has to say, and but at the end of it, if you want more clarification or if you want us to talk about something a little bit more, email me at joeysvendsenbc@gmail.com. And Jack and I can probably talk it over. And next time him and I get together, we can go a little deeper because we're going to hit a bunch of stuff, more of a shallow surface. But Jack, what have you been up to? I hear that your job has changed a bunch. You and I work at the same church. I always thought you were in charge of everything.
You're thinking of my father.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was my dad. Who is no stranger to the show.
Who is soon to be retiring from his role.
From his role. Oh, he's got a lot of other stuff he's doing. But yeah, no, he's kind of winding his time down at the church, and for whatever reason, everyone seems disappointed to see him go. Don't really get that, but whatever. To each his own.
Man. Yeah. What are three or four words or terminologies that your dad has no tolerance for? I think one is passionate. You can't say you're passionate about something.
Yeah. He gets real sick. I would say it is the indiscriminate, thoughtless use of the term that bothers him. Yeah, passionate. Really, anything that is sort of fashionable. Like, remember years ago when people would say blink, like my blink on that is kind of like with that Malcolm Gladwell book.
Yes,
he wanted to throw people out of windows when he heard that.
I know someone very specific at our church that I bet gave your dad, close to heart attacks every time because he had all these phrases on lockdown, man.
Yeah,
it's just like I was just
he's also, there are two that I especially enjoy. I agree with all of these. One is he really hates when people say, children are our future, because as opposed to what? Like that's how time works.
Right.
Like I would very much like to hear the alternative.
Right. You know what I like is a lot of the Christianese sounds travel oriented. Like, let's go ahead and land that. Let's unpack our thoughts. It's like, what's all these traveling analogies?
Yeah. I think another one he really does not care for that we use all the time is when we say we talk about people who have committed their lives to Christ for the first time. Well,
right.
Wait a minute. What are we saying? Are we hedging our bets? Like, look, this is just the first of many times, right? Like, what are we communicating when we say that? I don't think we think about that, right?
Oh man, that's good. That's good. I honestly, we should probably slow down here in a second, but we're about to jump into something. I don't like counting salvations. I just
sure.
There's nothing in me that feels good about, because first of all, and when I say we, I'm talking church as a whole, not Seacoast, but church as a whole. It's like we'll throw out a number like, oh, there was 53 commitments last night, and it's like, are you going to follow up on all 53 and make sure that you report back to us that 30 of them are no longer committed? Because and that sounds kind of like an asshole move, but if you're going to throw out a number of commitments, then it seems like you should also throw up a number of follow-ups that they're no longer committed, or just leave it alone and say it was a very fruitful night. Yeah, and you think maybe a lot of people were impacted. Leave it there.
No, I think that's right, and I think that's kind of how I feel about sharing stories, from Seacoast lately, like when we share stories of healing, love sharing those, but I would very much like in some cases for everyone to cool it until we wait for a little bit and kind of verify that this is a real thing and not, psychosomatic or just kind of I feel so much better, I must be healed. And I think that's actually one of the things you wanted to talk a little bit about today. But it's not that those things don't happen. I really believe they do. It's more like I think there's nothing wrong with being patient and verifying before because we're excited and we rush to tell these things, and maybe slow down a little bit, pump the brakes, and let's make sure the story we're telling is the real story. Yeah, for sure. So what? Give us a snapshot of what you're doing now at Seacoast, and you also got some side hustle too that I think is pretty interesting. Yeah, so at Seacoast, the shortest way to describe what I do is I'm the acting creative director. So we've been in the process of moving into a new worship center at Mount Pleasant. It's probably the biggest single project we've done in Seacoast's 31-year history. And so our managing director, Margaret Little, she stepped over to lead the building core team, and so I kind of stepped into her role and have been leading the creative team, because a number of the creative team have actually been stepping into primarily helping with building stuff. And so the creative team has been short-staffed in a sense over the last couple months as we're covering for everyone and trying to get back to normal now over the next month or so. But over the last couple months, I've been active creative director, and that's in addition to everything I was doing before, which was communications director, message planning, series planning, research, all those things. So
yeah, cool, man, cool. And you do that for other folks as well.
Oh yeah. You mentioned my side hustle, which
is that a terminology you don't like, Mr. Hoy?
No, I don't.
Scratch that off my list. Then.
I don't mind it. I feel extremely square.
Your main hustle. We all know Seacoast is your side deal.
I feel like my voice goes into ultra white guy mode when I say it's my side hustle. I just feel very square and like a loser adult when I say that.
That's why you got to own it. And
no, it's a phrase that's too cool for me to say. Anyway, So
own it like a white boy. Say it and just say it like a geek and mean it, and you're good. You're good. Go ahead, though.
My part-time work on the side, Joseph. No, so
do you remember those Budweiser? Do you remember the Budweiser commercials?
Oh yeah.
Like, what's up? And then they did a white version. It's like, how are you doing?
Do you
remember that?
Yeah, how are you? Yes, yes. So I've worked with a company called Docent for a long time. There was a couple of years where I started there at the end of 2009, left for a couple of years, and then went back in 2015. And so I've been back there for about 4 years now. And what Docent does is Docent does research for pastors, for messages, books, studies, kind of whatever they might need writing or research for. Clients range from guys who maybe they never went to school and don't really feel like they have a good handle on how to do research well. A lot of clients just don't have the time. Like when they started this, they went to school, they were great at studying, great at sermon prep, and that was fine when they had a church of 50 people, but now they've got this huge church and they have no time to do it. And so they kind of bring us in as research assistants. And so I've been doing that for a number of years, and I've got a few, high-profile clients now that, I don't want to get into specifics just because, some clients are get uncomfortable mentioning they have research assistants, which I don't think applies to any of my guys right now. But, I try not to broadcast who I work for.
That is funny to think about a pastor that they're willing to ask for help, but don't you dare let people know they're getting help.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of like, so anyway, I think you know who I work for right now. And they're fine. Like they wouldn't care. They really wouldn't. But some of the guys do. And it's interesting just because I've talked to guys who, not guys I work for, but other people who are like, oh, I can't believe that pastors would do that. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Authors, historians use research assistants.
Right.
Like this is, like you're just not thinking about it. People use research assistants. That is a totally common practice. So there's nothing weird or, sketchy about what we do. It's a necessary thing for people. I just think people don't think about it in the context of church.
Yeah, I'll push back just a slight bit. I think what is off-putting is when pastors talk and carry themselves in a way like they are the experts in what they're talking about.
Sure.
Where honestly, I think it would be rather refreshing and a sign of humility for a pastor to say, by the way, these stats I'm throwing at you, I sure didn't know. I you know what I'm saying? Like just a little bit of let us in on it a little bit instead of making everybody think you're the smartest person ever biblically.
I think there's certainly a place for that. But so here's an example. So Robert Caro, who's a biographer who has done, still in the middle of writing a series of biographies on Lyndon Johnson, probably the greatest set of biographies written over the last 100 years. I would make that argument. And so his research assistant has been his wife his whole career. Now, he doesn't mention that except in the acknowledgments of his book. So you're reading his book, and he doesn't pause in the middle of a paragraph to say, by the way, I got this tidbit from my wife, who's my researcher. So it's like there's a way of doing that. And so when you think about the kind of the format of a sermon, there's not really a good place to do that in a sermon. And so I think I definitely agree that I always think that I think that pastors can and should be better about citing sources. And I mean in general, right? Not just research assistants, but I mean like, so if you got a quote from a book, don't be afraid to say, I found this in this book. You don't need to pass it off as your own. I think that pastors can definitely do a better job of citing sources and content, but I do think it's interesting that, it's not like you can have footnotes in a sermon. And so I think that the medium of a sermon does make it hard to do that.
Yeah.
And so it has never bothered me that I've never had a client say from the stage, and I listen to their messages, I've never had a client say from the stage, oh, I have a research assistant. And to me, that's totally fine, if only because the sermon is really not a good place to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's clunky and weird. But that being said, yeah, I totally agree that pastors can and should be more open about kind of how they compile their sermons, and be more open about how they get help and where that help comes from. Because again, one of my deals is that I don't want to do something for a pastor that they are incapable of doing for themselves. Now in terms of research, that's a little bit of a gray area, because some guys just genuinely have no idea how to conduct research and they don't have the training, and that's a little bit different.
What is that? I mean, we're talking probably some pretty in-depth stuff, though, because it seems like anybody can look for something.
Well, so here's the thing. People think research is just looking things up, and it's not. Research is not finding information. Research is knowing what to keep. Anyone can find information, but how do you know if it's any good? How do you know what to cut? How do you know what... do you know how to verify something? So if you've never learned Greek, if you have zero familiarity with Greek language, please don't incorporate Greek into your message, because you're not going to have any idea what you're talking about. And so in that sense, it's good for those guys to have help and to have people who can come alongside them and kind of help them work with these things. But that being said, I think one of their jobs is to make sure that they are really understanding what they have in front of them, and not just repeating things or parroting things that they still don't understand, but hey, this guy told me it was good. And so, it's a little different, and I think it's a whole aspect of sermons that a lot of people don't know about and don't think about. But that is my world.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, yeah, after thinking about it, I kind of think we may take up our whole time talking about healing in general and just some of the stuff that's going on at Seacoast. I would imagine it would, and which is good, because I've got a lot more to bring you back on that I want to talk about. But so just to give our listeners context, this is not a conversation behind anybody's back. Everything that I'm saying right now I've said to our lead pastor, because we're led by a pastor who has the same concerns and the same reservations and the same curiosity and joy about stuff that's going on. But it's not a culture in which people are given like an ultimatum: either get with the program, stop asking questions, or get out. I mean, it really is something that's been happening here, and kind of everything is on the table. So I have not been, I don't have the information that you have, Jack, as far as validated miracles. And I mean, I've heard some things. I listened to Josh on his father's podcast, Pastor Collective. Is it Pastoral Collective or Pastor Collective?
I think it's Pastor Collective.
Yeah. So I've heard some of those stories, but I don't know these people, but I trust Josh's judgment, especially with the very specific examples that he gave of people that he knew. So I went to the second one, and the thing that so I'll put it this way: I don't think that you can do a prayer service perfectly. So that's not my beef. There's just no way. But I felt super uneasy, man, and here's why: is so I'll put it out there. I do think people were being healed, and at that point, it's kind of like, okay, well, our hands are open to whatever God wants to do, and maybe overlook the human stuff. But there was some tricky stuff, man. Were you at the second one by any chance?
No, no. My wife was. I watched part of it on the live stream. Yeah.
Well, there was a time in which people were basically asked to stand up So he was basically articulating promises in God's word, and he said that oftentimes, we're in the presence of God, and God may heal us heal you at any time. So if that's the case, stand up so we can all clap.
Right.
So he reads something, nobody stands up, reads something, then one or two people stand up, and maybe one's a kid who's just kind of caught up in innocence and, whatever, and people clap and stuff. But then, I start thinking, I'm like, I am clapping for stuff that I don't even know. I don't know these people.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're lying. I don't know if it's healthy for them to believe that they're healed, like
right.
if they're a mental health patient. And I really felt I can't be a part of that sort of systematic, I'm going to clap for these people that are standing up. So I really felt uneasy about that. And again, I can chalk that up to maybe it was just a bad mistake to do it that way. And I sure as hell would probably make a lot of mistakes if I was in that situation as well. The second thing that I thought was super troublesome, and then the rest of it, I'm just like, hey, we're on this journey together as a church. We'll figure it out. I'm so happy that our leaders are processing things as they are. I don't think they're doing it perfectly, but neither would I. But it was like this environment of anything bad that's happening to you is bad for you, and and we need to pray it away. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't read the 2 chapters in a row in the Bible without picking up on some sort of redemptive process that happens with trials and suffering. In fact, if I had a life verse, which I'm saying this out loud for the first time, I guess it would be, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So it's like, I felt like it was creating an environment that I know our leadership doesn't live in, but it was creating an environment of, hey, if you're in the will of God, God's will for you is for this stuff to be removed. That's why we're just commanding it all to be gone, and we can have faith that God's going to do it. And dude, I don't, at the end of the day, I don't know if it was God's will for me to struggle with depression for the decades that I struggled with, but I can certainly vouch for what it has made me now, and the strength and courage that I have for future things, the number of people that I've been able to be vulnerable with that made them feel normal because they were going through the same stuff. And it was like, how dare we label everything bad because it's painful? And that's how it was coming across.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious. You can skip all of that if you want. Just what's kind of your snapshot feelings, given that you love this church, you grew up in this church, you've been here way longer than I have, and so you do have an invested interest. I mean, how do you feel about all this? Because it's totally uncharted territory. This is the kind of stuff that and I'll say this phrase loosely, but we've kind of been protected from because of all the unhealthy manifestations that we've seen in the past, and with Pastor Greg's background in Pentecostalism and everything. I mean, he's always wanted to have a church where everybody's welcome and things are done in a non-spooky way and all of that stuff. So what's your feelings about all this?
So why I think that, first of all, everything you said, I'm kind of on board with. I think that I guess my deal is, I believe God can heal. I believe God does heal. And I was massively uncomfortable with a lot of what happened at the service I saw and how it happened, I think, which is exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Now, I've got no problem with saying, I mean, look, my feelings of discomfort are irrelevant in terms of what was real and what was good.
Sure.
How I feel doesn't matter. It's just sort of the stuff that made me uncomfortable, the stuff that worried me. And when I say worried, I don't mean like, worried for Seacoast necessarily. I mean just worried for people, because the deal is that was not a room full of people who wanted, ankle sprains and, hair healed and hair to grow back and all, it's like that was a room full of desperate people with serious problems who have, in a lot of cases, exhausted all other options. That's the reality of that room. That room was full of people who needed healing from God because they basically weren't going to get it from anywhere else. So I was actually, so I was, like I said, I watched that from home on the live stream. And at one point, one of the guys, talked about a running. He said, "Hey, I feel like I need to pray for someone with a running injury." And so I was at home and I had, had been in the middle of dealing with, some knee issues from running, and I was in physical therapy, and kind of my thing is, well, I mean, heck, I don't think so. Right. Like, I don't think anything's going to happen, but, I kind of prayed with him, and it was like tried to make myself as open as possible, because again, I believe God heals, but kind of my prayer was like, So in Daniel, when Nebuchadnezzar tells Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, hey, if you're not going to bow down to my statue, I'm going to throw you in this furnace. And they basically say to him, hey, listen, our God can save us. But then they say, but even if he doesn't, we're not going to do what you tell us. And that's kind of my deal with that, is that I believe that God can, it was like, God, I believe you can heal me, but even if you don't, right? And in some sense, like you're saying, especially if you don't, I still trust you and believe in you and love you.
Because that's our real hope.
Well, yes, and again, it's like my belief and my faith and my love for God are not dependent on my body and the difficulties I face. Now, they can, difficulties can impact, my faith, and they can, give me doubts and questions and fear, but it's like if my faith is dependent on my external circumstances, then that's a problem. So I feel like in the sense of kind of where you are on a lot of that stuff, I mean, look, I want all of it to be real, right? Like I want every person who raises their hand and says they're healed for that to be real. But I think that, one thing I hear sometimes is this idea that, So like God wants everyone to be healed. Okay. Yes, but. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
But because the reality is that God could heal everybody right now and he doesn't. Right? And that I think is the reality that we have to deal with, and that is a point of view that gets people angrier at me than anything else I have ever believed.
Are you serious?
Yes. No, I've even in my like angriest Calvinist college phase, right? Like hyper reform Jack, that stuff didn't make people as upset as when I say that I believe God can heal and I believe he usually doesn't. To me, that just seems like a simple statement of reality. I mean, it's like, I'm not really sure how you argue with that, but I think that makes people really upset. And I think it makes people really upset because they don't want it to be true.
Right.
But, I mean...
Doesn't that show something a little off in their hearts with how they are responding or seeking God? And that's not a critical statement. I'm not talking about anybody specifically, but... If that rubs them the wrong way, and you're right, it is pretty obvious.
Right. No, I don't think that's something...
What percentage of people at those two prayer services are going to die in the next 100 years?
Yeah, right. Yeah, all of them. And that's my deal. And that's something that I have tried to, kind of reinforce in some ways in conversations with people is, listen, I really hope that the people who raise their hands got healed completely. And here's the deal. They're going to die.
Right.
And it's like healing apart from knowing Jesus is useless. It's useless. Like if the gospel is true, and if we believe that the goal of this life is to know and follow Christ, right? Then you can be so one of my favorite stories in the New Testament, especially in these circumstances, are the 10 lepers, right? So these 10 dudes see Jesus walking into a town. They shout at him, heal us. And he says, go show yourselves to the priests. And so they go, and they, on the way to being to see the priest, they realize they're healed. And one of the guys turns back and goes to thank Jesus. And I think it is really interesting because here's the deal. What that story shows is that it is possible to meet Jesus in person, to be miraculously healed by him in person, and still to miss him. So like that scenario had a 90% failure rate for knowing Jesus. All those dudes got healed. All of them got healed. And only one of them understood the point. And that is scary. Because what it means is that you can experience a literal miracle. You can experience physical healing from a terminal disease and still miss the point. Yeah. And I think that is really my concern with all of this. It's not to me, it's not about the healings. It's, are we pointing people to Jesus? And I think we are. I think we are really doing what we can to remind people, hey, like, this is the point of these things, and in the end, this is what matters. I do think we're doing a good job with that. But I think my concern is that, so you asked, like, is there something wrong in people's hearts that they would have that reaction to when I say I believe God can heal, but he usually doesn't? I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with their hearts. I think that can be just a reflection of desperation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because it's basically what you're forcing them to come to terms with is that they might never be healed, that might be the reality for the rest of their life. And that is, I mean, that can be impossibly hard for people to wrap their minds around. And that can be impossibly hard for people to accept. And I don't want to minimize that at all. I don't. But I think that is the reality that we need to help people. So one of the things I've said a lot about around the healing services is I'm not really so much concerned with helping people who have been healed. I'm concerned with are we preparing, like one of the things we talked about is like, how are we helping our people be prepared for what's happening? And kind of one of my things has been, agreed, but we also need to be preparing our people for things that are not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are not going to be healed. And are we preparing people to not be healed? And that is the thing I think that I am most concerned with. It's not whether some of the healings are real. It's are we making connections with people? Are we being intentional about connecting with people who are not being healed and helping them walk through that? Because we're really good at pointing people towards, like you said, these victories and healings, but what we're not very good at, and by we, I don't just mean Seacoast, I mean, honestly, American Christianity in all its forms. Is I'll put the blame especially on evangelicals, since I whatever that word means, I guess I am one. We are not good at helping people walk through suffering. We like to point people towards victory and healing, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But honestly, like the light at the end of your tunnel might be death. Yeah. And we are not good at helping people accept that suffering might be a part of their reality. And frankly, suffering is a part of our reality. I mean, here's the deal. If being a Christian means imitating Christ, it is impossible to imitate Jesus without suffering.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How can you imitate Jesus and yet assume that one of the defining features of his life can somehow be absent from yours?
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
That's such a good point. And I mean, so, and here's my position on healings. Like if someone received a healing and to this day, you're still baffled by I celebrate with you. I don't got anything else to say other than I'm very, very happy that happened. I can't validate it myself, but I can certainly celebrate with that person. And whether it was God, whether it was how God created that person's body to heal itself, whether it had something to do with some positive thinking. As far as I'm concerned, all good comes from God, so it just doesn't really matter to me how it happened. If it happened, I'm happy. I'm really excited that happened. I mean, and I think my big thing about healing too is if you're the recipient of a healing or a miracle or anything like that, it shouldn't be a part of you shouldn't need other people to get behind you and validate you and say, yes, that shouldn't be important. I mean, why would it be? If you received a healing, who cares what other people think? You got your healing. And then you've got something to celebrate about and testify about. And there's probably going to be some people that resonate and are like, wow, that was awesome. But it shouldn't be something that everyone's expected to. And that's one thing I really appreciate about Seacoast is there is so much room for skepticism, questions, even people being like, why are we doing this? This isn't Seacoast. I mean, all of those discussions are welcomed. And I just think that makes Seacoast very, very special. Very special.
Well, it's funny. It's like the hey, this isn't Seacoast. And that's true in the sense that this has not been something that we've experienced before. Sure. But at the same time, that also kind of makes me laugh. So I've been a part of Seacoast for 25 years.
Right.
And like we've had a lot of weird seasons. Like, so I was in the youth group, the high school youth group and I'm sure that a lot of it was just emotions, but I was in the high school youth group when the Holy Spirit like wrecked every kid in it on a trip. And like, here's the deal: was some of it emotion?
So you mean Christianese wrecked, not like they got in a bad wreck?
No, I'm sorry. That's probably good clarification. Thank you. No, I mean spiritually wrecked. Like,
Okay. I love using those words. Man, the Holy Spirit just dismantled me today. Just annihilated me today.
You know one that
dismembered me today.
Yeah. You know what I really want to come back is defenestrate. You know what defenestrate means? No. It means to throw someone out a window. That's my favorite. And no one ever, you never see like John Oliver defenestrates Trump. It's like, that's such a great one. It's my favorite.
I did not know that there was a word for throwing someone out the window. That's great.
Defenestration. To throw someone out a window.
That's great.
I was in the youth group when, it was transformed and was some of it emotion and, just teenage enthusiasm. Oh yeah, totally. But some of it, a good portion of it was real because like that group of kids was never the same. Yeah. It changed the youth group and it was actually honestly one of those moments because it impacted the church as well because we weren't that big then. It changed the church as well. And it was so anyway, all that to say like, yeah, this healing stuff is kind of new to us, but we've had a lot of moments where God has done some things that a lot of us were like, what is happening? That's kind of weird. Don't know if that's us. Yeah. But I think one of the things about Seacoast is, let me say this. So I think that now, 31 years later, after, we accidentally pioneered multi-site, now that Pastor Greg is president of ARC, the Association of Related Churches, I think that Seacoast has kind of developed a reputation as a visionary church. Yeah. And I think honestly the reality is we're accidental visionaries. Like we have never really, there's definitely been moments of vision and sort of some clarity where we can see where we believe God is leading us. But honestly, I think our greatest strength over the years, and this has been something that Greg has modeled, our greatest strength has not been these crystal clear visions we have of where God is leading us. Our greatest strength has been being willing to follow where we believe God is leading us as humbly as we can. Yeah. And sort of accepting that we don't fully understand what is happening or where we're going, but our best understanding is that this is where we think we are supposed to go now, and walking that way humbly and carefully. And honestly, to me, that is Seacoast's greatest strength as an institution, is it not this like big visionary movement church, but is a very humble church that does its best to see where God is leading and follow. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there is any point so someone just recently said, hey, I really want to know your thoughts on this book that I've never read, so I'm going to have to get kind of a snapshot, maybe ask some other people about it. But it's basically a huge book on healing training. Do you think that there is anything good that comes out of someone saying that they know more about healing or they know how to pray better for healing? I would say if there is something to it, my guess would have to be that it has to do with just how the body and mind naturally works and more of like a positive way of speaking or a certain way to react. But once people start turning like healing and prayer and miracles into like something you can get better at, I just don't feel like there's any room for that. Is there any prerequisite that gives people a better shot at getting healed by God? Oh, geez. So
skip that.
No, I'm not going to skip it. I'm not scared. So in terms of the question, like, is there anything you could do that like gives you a better, like raises your percentage?
Here's a low hanging bad example. Like when my first cousin's husband passed away, like my wife and I and my parents are a part of a name it, claim it family, and we have kind of gone away from that. We don't see God working like a drive-through fast food restaurant anymore, and their hearts like it was with good intentions. My gosh, they wanted our family member to be healed from his terminal illness, but they stood so strongly on it, and no was not an option. It wasn't God heal, but if not, we will still serve you, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was, no, God is going to heal, and we're not talking about him going to heaven. We're talking he's going to be healed. And so when he passed away, there was some shipwrecked faith. And I told this to Priscilla, and she's like, no way, that can't be true. But I guarantee you it's true that if some people knew, and I think maybe some of them do, there's an outside chance that maybe me and Priscilla are seen as potentially people that held back the healing, even though we were with them in faith. But it was definitely, in my opinion, more of a childlike faith of, this is what we want, God, and that's the end of it. We don't know what you're going to do, but here's what we want, and we know that you can heal.
Yeah. No, so here's the deal. If no's not an option, then God's your slave.
Right.
And I hate to break it to you, but he's not.
Right.
I think that, and so, like, the idea that you can do something that raises your chances of getting healed, or the idea that you can do something to hold back a healing. I mean, I guess my deal is that, like, yeah, we see over and over in the Bible that we can do things that kind of, we can resist how God wants to move in our lives.
Yeah.
Right. Like, generally that is true. But it's like, can you apply that to healing? I have no idea. That's kind of between you and God. Right. Because in the Bible, you see God heal people who are terrible people. Like, in the Old Testament, Naaman, right? So he's the general of an enemy army. And God uses, I think it's Elisha or Elijah, I can't remember. I think it's Elisha, to heal him. He's not a good guy.
Right.
And he doesn't have to do anything.
Right.
Like, all he has to do is do what Elisha tells him, which is to go wash in the river Jordan. It's like, so, like, this idea that you can impact God's blessing or God's healing in your life, it's like, sure, I suppose, but that's between you and God. Like, that is not, and that's not something that I would ever want to speak to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I had something. Oh, so in terms of, like, the book, right? Like, this, can you ever have such a thing as, like, this expert guide to healing where you can get better at being a healer? I tend to view that with a raised eyebrow, a severely arched eyebrow, and my deal again, it's like, it's not like public speaking or improving your handwriting, where it's something that you are doing, because healing is not something you are doing. Yeah, it's something that you are invoking God and asking him to do, right? It's not something you're doing. And I think this idea that there are things that you can do and ways you can do it to be more effective, it's like, again, that's just ancient religion, where it's like, there are specific words that the gods need to hear if you want them to act on your behalf, and there's a way you have to do the sacrifices, and if you mess it up, they're going to curse you instead of bless you. And, like, that's just ancient Near Eastern pagan religion. Like, that's not new. That's not Christianity. That's just paganism, because that's how, humanity throughout history has tried to invoke the blessing of gods and goddesses by saying the right words and doing the right rituals. And that's, to me, what that sounds like. Now, an interesting example in terms of, like, so if you want to follow an example, in Acts, and I can't remember where it is, but in Acts, there's a story of a girl named Dorcas, and her other, her I think it says her Greek name is Tabitha, or maybe it's her Aramaic name. I can't remember which is which. But her name is Dorcas and Tabitha, right? Like, depending on what language you're using. Now, it's interesting that, like, it tells you her other name is Tabitha, because that's actually the name Peter uses, like, when he raises her, right? He miraculously heals her, right? Like, she's lying dead, and he raises her from the dead, and he says, Tabitha, rise. And I bring that up because in the Gospels, when Jesus raises Jairus' daughter, he says, little girl, arise. And the Aramaic for little girl is Talitha, or Talita. It's just one letter difference. Tabitha, Talitha.
Yeah.
And so I think what you see Peter doing is reenacting that moment. Wow. And think about it, right? Like, it's Peter. I think he's like, I have no idea. I saw Jesus do this once.
Right.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this as close to what I saw him do as I can.
Right.
And I think, like, so look, if you're going to you want someone to imitate, there's this great guy in the New Testament who was very good at healing, and his name was Jesus, and he's the one who's going to be doing it for you anyway. So I think it is interesting in terms of there's nothing wrong with, like, emulating some of the people we see in the New Testament, right? There's nothing wrong with, I think, even emulating people today, right? Because we do that in prayer. Like, if you ever listen to someone pray and you thought, oh my gosh, that is amazing, I want to pray like that. Right. And so you kind of imitate them a little bit. That's fine. I think imitation to learn and to grow is one thing.
Father gods, I like to imitate the Father God. Father God in the name of the Father God. Yeah.
But kind of like this idea that there are tricks or tips that you can use to up your game. That to me is a very different concept and discussion, and that's the one where I look at it and like, nope.
Yeah, my position on that is I do not believe that way, and if I'm wrong, I'm surely ready to admit it in heaven. Like, if I should have approached healing differently, and I'll be, I'm all ears now. Like, convince me otherwise, but I can't. I mean, I've been around too many situations in which the families played by all the rules of healing and believing and standing in agreement and saying the right words, and every single time the person who was supposed to die died, and it was tragic. And I feel like a lot of those families were set up to believe in a way that just made it that much harder. I do want to say, I know you got to wrap this up soon. I do want to say, one thing that you said earlier, as far as I agree to some degree when you said that it doesn't really matter, whether or not everything resonates with you about the prayer service and all that stuff. I do think it matters, though, that your opinion would need to be heard, mine as well, anybody in the church, if there was something that you thought, okay, this is clearly harmful. And it could even be your opinion, and you could be wrong, but obviously Seacoast would be a place where you could say, look, this just doesn't seem right. It seems unhealthy. I think in that case, you're part of the church. Your voice can and should be heard, I think.
So are you asking me if there's anything like that I want to share on this very public
platform? No. I'm just saying that I don't think the approach would be right for Jack just to be quiet and go with it, even if he saw something that was a little bit out of bounds.
And I think it's really worth saying that, and that's not what Seacoast is like.
Right, exactly.
I mean, Pastor Greg, Pastor Josh, I mean, they've been very open about some of the things that kind of made them uncomfortable.
Yep.
And again, not in the sense of like, oh, this is evil and bad and we have to stop it. Just in the sense of, I want to be open as I can, but I have some concerns.
Yep.
And I mean, like there was some stuff that, like, if I had been there, and if I was in a position to talk to kind of the visitors we had, the guest speakers, and if I could give them feedback or guidance, there's definitely some stuff I'd say, hey, listen, you got to stop doing this.
Right.
But honestly, part of my deal is, to quote Jeff Lebowski, that's just like my opinion, man.
Right.
I've got one of the things I try to be conscious of is I am me, and I am someone who is very different than a lot of people that I work with at Seacoast, right? Like, that. Personality-wise, temperament, all that stuff. And one thing is that I feel like Seacoast is really good for me about is it helps me realize and remember that the difference between conviction and preference, because I have convictions and I have preferences, and it's very easy for us, especially when it comes to church, to let our preferences turn into convictions.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, I don't know if we have time for this, and so I'll tell you what my next questions are. Okay. Because if so, we would just start the next time we're together with this. But so basically, we'll end it here. 2 different verses, and I'm actually going to try to practice self-control and not give my opinion and just hear you out. But it's going to be way helpful if you agree with me in the first place, then I won't have anything to add. But so basically, one passage, what did Jesus mean when he said, "You would do greater things in my name"? Quote, "Verily, or very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father." And then the other statement that I'm curious how you take is, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives and his home." And then Mark, or whoever wrote Mark, said he could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. I know how the general evangelical public takes both of these passages, and I don't take them that way, but I'm curious as to how you read these.
Oh, well, okay, so can we start with how evangelicals, let's start with the greater things. What is your perspective on how evangelicals read that?
I have heard a peer of mine, and I'll use that term loosely. That sounds like a really jerk thing to say. Loosely. But he basically was trying to tell small group that any of us can walk on water, like very simply. And being a younger leader and not wanting to just smash people, I didn't say anything, but now I just wish I would have said, "Okay, let's go do this then." And have a good conversation about it. So I think a lot of people say, if we can access a certain level of faith that maybe a lot of us, we just can't figure out how to do, it's there though. And we can literally move a smoky or a rocky mountain because the Bible says that. It's not even figurative. We can do that. That's how people take that. Like, we should be raising people from the dead because Jesus did. And he said we'll do greater things. So we must be needing to resurrect a lot of people. Dude, I've actually had someone come to the hospital after someone was tragically killed in a car wreck. And when they came to the hall, I basically said, "You have heard, correct?" And this person said, "Yes, I have come to heal, to bring this person back to life." And dude, so I was left with an option of saying, "You're not going to, because that would require me to go get the head of the hospital to take you down to the morgue and to inform this new widow that we are going to try to bring hubby back to life." I wasn't going to have any part of that. So that's the sort of stuff that comes out of these verses.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think that interpretation is so typical of the evangelical tendency to totally misunderstand the whole purpose of power. Jesus's most powerful moment was not when he rose Lazarus from the dead or when he healed the lepers or any of that stuff. Jesus's greatest display of power was on the cross. Like, that is his defining moment of what power is. Because that was the moment that, the kingdom of evil was defeated and we were set free. Like, power is not being able to pick up a mountain and throw it. Right? Power is hanging on a cross. And that is what power is in Christianity. And this idea that greater things means healing, it's like you might want to read to the end of the book. Yeah. Like, I feel like you stopped midway through the Gospels.
And what would people find if they read to the rest of to the end of Revelation? Like,
so what you're gonna see is that
I've never read all of that. I just stop at the Gospels. I'm not familiar with Romans, Corinthians, James, none of that.
Well, it's again, so what you're going to see throughout the rest of the book, all the epistles. So the Jews thought that the Messiah was going to come and political liberation, and he's going to be king and set them free from Rome. And instead, what you have are all these letters basically telling these small house churches to love one another and take care of the poor and widows. Yeah. Well, that doesn't seem like power. What are they doing? What? Right. But listen. They clearly didn't interpret greater things as these huge, flashy displays of power. There were miracles, but clearly the church didn't have this identity crisis once they tapered off after the apostles died. I think that when you look at the, you will do greater things, there are kind of two ways to look at that, but I think they're both fine. But I don't have a strong, preference or conviction about either. One is just pure, it could have meant, and I think this is the weaker option, purely numerically, right? Like, obviously, we're going to do it cumulatively. Yeah. We will do far more than Jesus was able to accomplish in his short ministry. That's one. I think that's kind of weak. The other one is that Jesus's work was to set us free and to inaugurate the church, and kind of the idea of reconciling the world to God through the church would be an ongoing work that we were called to. And that is the greater work. Yeah. The greater work is to have the kingdom of God fill the earth.
Whoa, so a greater work is people going from life to death, not people getting delivered from an ailment.
Well, I would say that yeah, the greater work is to reconcile people to God.
I'm being cynical, like that should be an obvious.
Oh yeah. And so I think that that's kind of my read on that, is that we've been called to be a part of seeing the kingdom of God fill the earth. And I think that's what Jesus points and says, that is the greater work, because that is what I came to inaugurate. And I think honestly we make a mistake in terms of, like, so we bring out our scales and like we put, crucifixion and resurrection on one side and kingdom of God filling the earth on the other. It's like, I don't know if those balance out. And it's like, that's like, stop thinking about it like that. That's a dumb way to think about it. It's a very like human way to think about it. It's like, what are the stats on that? Yeah. And so that's kind of my read on that one. And what was the other one?
So the other one is basically why me and Priscilla could have sentenced my cousin to death, and that is Jesus could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. So basically the insinuation there for evangelicals is Jesus is limited by our faith or lack of.
It's in Mark 6.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the idea that,
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you my perspective on it. How about that? And then you can poke holes in that. I think that this may be that God is not going to be a circus show. Like, God is not going to come into a town and do a bunch of healings and people, throw popcorn up in the air and clap their hands laughing like, "Oh my gosh, this magician is so awesome." Like, that's just not, like, his healing was connected to real change that had to do with people recognizing their need for God. So for him, because the healings would not have led to his ultimate purpose, he just couldn't do that. And not as in, I'm not able to. It's just like, I can't do that. It would be like me saying, I can't let my daughter spend the night at someone's house who I don't know. I have the ability to do that, but no, I can't do that. That's my take.
Yeah, and I think that could be part of it. I do think part of it is like, look, if you're gonna, actively resist what God is trying to do. So it's interesting. Like, there are times in the Bible where people actively resist what God is trying to do, and like Jonah is a great example. Yeah. Right. Like, can you resist God's will for you? Yes, but sometimes He's going to throw you off a boat and vomit you on a shore. It's like Jonah could have kept running away, but it's like, how many options? Like, do you feel like Jonah really thought he had many options after that incident? Yeah. Probably not. Like, I feel like his options were narrowed. Right. And so I do think there are instances in the Bible where it's like, you can't really resist what God is doing. But there are other times where it's sort of like, hey, listen, if you're not, and this is the thing Jesus says to disciples, right? Like, go into these towns and villages, and if they don't welcome you, shake the dust from your feet and leave them. And so I think there's this sense that, especially in terms of Jesus's ministry to his people, because he says kind of over and over, like, he came to Israel first, and there were so many hard hearts. And it's like, I came to you first, like, you were my people, and I'm coming to you first to do these works, but there's only so much I can do if you're going to actively resist me. Yeah. And so I do think there is that element there where it's like, hey, listen, if you were going to fight the good things I'm doing, then I'm not going to do them. And I think sometimes that feels like a victory. It's like, good, we don't want you anyway. And it's only, it's like, but you have no idea who you're talking to, and you have no idea what you're saying no to. Yeah. And so I do think there is that component to it as well, where I think you see in Jesus' ministry that he definitely gives people agency to reject him and what he wants to do. Yeah. So I think that's probably in there too.
Yeah, I like it. Well, dude, I'm going to take one for the team, and I'm going to be naming this episode, God Can Heal Everyone, but He Just Usually Doesn't.
And that way a bunch of people can be mad at me, and then we'll be in the same position. That's what homeboys do for one another, man. I got you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I haven't mentioned like any contact information to me. I mean, you can find me on Twitter, I guess, but I'm not giving my email out.
Why don't, as the title, I'll actually put it in quotations and put Jack Hoy of Seacoast Church.
And then put my contact information. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much.